there are 2-3 things that every aspirant should do, or I would say the difference between a bad aspirant or a good aspirant is that you don't just do what is required. Jitna enough hai sirf utna hi nahi karna. You have to go one step forward. You have to see the application part of what you have studied. अगर आपको RBI में जाना है, there has to be a passion about the organization, what the organization is doing. What will I do if I go to this organization? Start grasping or getting whatever you can about the organization. RBI गवर्नर्स के इंटरव्यू देखो. दिस इज व्हाट आई डिड टू बी ऑनेस्ट. तो वो पैशन अलग दिखता है उन लोगों में जिनमें ड्राइव होती है और वो आर गुड एस्पिरेंट्स.
Hi everyone, my name is Anuj Jindal. I welcome you again to my channel. RBI 2023 results के बाद a lot of students wanted me to first talk with Karnima ma'am, and that's what we're going to do today. My first interview of successful RBI aspirants, or should I say RBI officers, is going to be with Karnima ma'am. आज आपको वो RBI 247 नहीं पढ़ाएंगी, बट RBI में उनकी सक्सेस स्टोरी के बारे में कुछ ना कुछ ज़रूर अच्छी बातें बताएंगी. So first of all, I would request Karnima ma'am to tell you about her story, to introduce herself to you, जिन स्टूडेंट्स को नहीं पता है उनकी स्टोरी के बारे में, और फिर हम डिस्कशन को आगे लेके चलेंगे. Karnima ma'am.
Hi everyone. I'm sure a lot of you would already know me as Karnima ma'am or finance faculty. Yes, I'm not here to teach today. A little about my background. I have done BCom honors from Shahid Bhagat Singh College. Thereafter, I joined EY, Ernst & Young, worked there for a couple of months. In 2020, I decided diligently to prepare for RBI Grade B exam. However, 2020 में हुआ नहीं exam, so I prepared for SEBI. Unfortunately, interview नहीं clear हुआ SEBI का. So I started preparing for RBI again the very next year, 2022 में I gave the interview. When I couldn't clear the interview, I decided अब घर पे बैठ के नहीं पढ़ाई करनी है. So I joined ETC EduTech. And I've been your mentor for the last 1 year and cleared RBI Grade B this year.
तो कर्णिमा, मुझे अभी भी नहीं पता है honestly, and we have talked about it multiple times कि out of all the places that you could have joined, what made you come to us and think about teaching at all, because that had not been your background in any way possible. तो तुम्हारे दिमाग में क्या आया कि नहीं अब ये करते हैं, अभी एग्जाम क्लियर नहीं हो पा रहे हैं, 2-3 साल हो गए हैं, तो अब ये ट्राई करते हैं.
So I never thought of teaching ever. कभी decided नहीं था, कभी सोचा भी नहीं था. But after I gave the interview and I couldn't clear, so I thought अब एक साल और घर पे बैठ के तो नहीं पढ़ाई करनी है. I wanted to work. Yes, monetary benefits थोड़े होते हैं, थोड़ा background में सोचते रहते हैं हम वो. But I wanted to join at a place where at the same time I am learning and I am able to share my experiences with the students. So getting into the interview stage is not easy. Top 600 में आना is not easy. So एक थोड़ा एक वो point था that I have gone there, in the RBI office, given the interview, so I could share my experience and at the same time वही चीज पढ़ने को मिलेगी जो next time exam में आएगा. So there were 2 benefits for joining here.
When you get selected, then everybody is hoo-ha about you, everybody praises you, but when you don't, then the same people don't shy away from criticizing you. And the same must have happened with you also, when you could not clear SEBI interview and RBI interview. And that happened when you were teaching as well. Has happened with all of us. मुझे भी बहुत criticism मिलता है, आज भी मिलता है, और आपको भी मिला, काफ़ी मिला. तो what were your learnings from that criticism that you received as an interviewee who could not clear and as a teacher, that you think the students should learn, especially the ones who could not clear the interview this year?
So there are a lot of people who faced failures. I'm not the only one. But to get back up is the most important thing. अगली बार एग्जाम देना है या नहीं देना है, that is the first thing that we have to decide. And once you've decided कि अब अगली बार एग्जाम देना है, so you have to double the efforts that you've put in for the first time. अलग मेहनत करनी है. You have to do something different. The most important is to be motivated, to stay motivated, and to have a lot of discipline. So criticism वगैरह सब दिमाग में चलता है. It doesn't go away. Back of our mind हमारे दिमाग में यही चलता है कि अगर अभी भी ना हुआ तो, या लास्ट टाइम की तरह फेल हो गए तो. That's what was there in my mind as well. But इन सबको हटा के सिर्फ एग्जाम पे फोकस करोगे तो आगे पहुंच ही जाओगे. That's what I think.
What would your advice be before we move on to the actual interview and talk about sources and everything, as a teacher also to the students, you've been teaching for the past 1 year, कि क्या उनको करना चाहिए that you have learned in the past 1 year that can turn around their failures into success? What do you think that X factor can be?
Okay. There are 2-3 things that every aspirant should do, or I would say the difference between a bad aspirant or a good aspirant is that you don't just do what is required. जितना enough है सिर्फ उतना ही नहीं करना. You have to go one step forward. You have to see the application part of what you have studied. अगर आपको RBI में जाना है, there has to be a passion about the organization, what the organization is doing. What will I do if I go to this organization? Start grasping or getting whatever you can about the organization. RBI गवर्नर्स के इंटरव्यू देखो. दिस इज व्हाट आई डिड टू बी ऑनेस्ट. तो वो पैशन अलग दिखता है उन लोगों में जिनमें ड्राइव होती है और वो आर गुड एस्पिरेंट्स.
Now, this is something that is very easy to say, but I would want to talk a little bit about this. बहुत सारे एस्पिरेंट्स आज भी आते हैं और व्हेन यू वर टीचिंग आते थे कि ये तो ज़रूरत नहीं है पढ़ने की, दिस इज़ टू डिफिकल्ट. डज RBI आस्क दीज काइंड ऑफ क्वेश्चंस? RBI 247 इतना डिफिकल्ट क्यों बना दिया है? And there were a lot of criticisms when we were teaching this year, but the same students after phase 1 were like, oh, this was all very useful, who had studied RBI 247. तो जो ऐसे स्टूडेंट सोचते हैं कि एग्जाम में इतना चाहिए, इतना पढ़ के चले जाते हैं, and there's nothing wrong with that because it's called targeted approach following what the exam demands. What do you think? Where do you draw the line? Do you follow that, or do you go one step ahead everywhere in all the subjects and try to cover everything in depth?
I think it all depends on the time that you have. अगर आप एंड मोमेंट पे पढ़ रहे हो, यू कांट रीड एवरीथिंग. यू हैव टू हैव अ टारगेटेड अप्रोच कि एग्जाम में ये क्वेश्चंस आते हैं या नहीं आते हैं तो कितने डेप्थ में आते हैं, बिकॉज यू डू नॉट हैव टाइम. बट इफ यू हैव टाइम, इफ यू हैव इनफ टाइम, लेट्स से 6 मंथ्स है आपको पढ़ने के लिए, यू हैव टू गेट इनफ नॉलेज अबाउट एवरीथिंग. बिकॉज इंटरव्यू में देयर इज नो लिमिट. दे कैन आस्क यू एनीथिंग इन द इंटरव्यू, राइट? सो अगर शुरू से ही उसकी प्रेपरेशन करोगे एंड यू गेट एन इंटरेस्ट. इनिशियली हम सब सोचते हैं कितना पढ़ना है, क्या आता है, क्या नहीं. But once you start reading, you start getting interest in, what is RBI, everything about RBI. Not just finance or RBI, but management, ESI, in सब subjects में भी धीरे धीरे करके interest आ जाता है. So I would say it all depends on the time that we have. Time कम है तो yes, targeted approach follow करनी चाहिए. But if we have enough time, then जितना पढ़ सकते हो पढ़ो, because that makes you a better person. That makes you a knowledgeable person, a wiser person.
I can completely relate to this. In fact, I'm rereading a book on economics right now. क्योंकि मुझे मन है फिर से economics पढ़ाने का. और I was not able to just pick up that book and read. I was just able to read like 10-15 pages every day, and I was very pissed. कि यार ये क्या हो रहा है? Why am I not finding it interesting enough? And then I kept aside all my novels. कि अभी ये नहीं पढ़ूंगा. I'll just focus on this book. And then suddenly just like that, I started getting interest again. तो फिर मुझे रियलाइज हुआ कि जैसे ही डिस्ट्रैक्शन वहाँ से हटा, आई कुड easily focus on what my target was. So I can completely understand what you're trying to say here. Coming to time factor, now let us dive deeper into when did you start preparing, और एग्जाम से कितने टाइम पहले, और एग्जाम से पहले तुमने क्या क्या किया तैयारी में. लेट्स टॉक अबाउट दैट वन बाय वन. तो सबसे पहले पढ़ाई कब शुरू की और कौन से सब्जेक्ट से शुरू की, एंड व्हाई डिड यू पिक अप दोस सब्जेक्ट्स एट ऑल?
So because I had prepared in 2022 as well, so there was a base was set. I had already known what is the syllabus and वो सब research करने की जरूरत नहीं थी. I knew the syllabus by heart because last time पढ़ा था. I also had my notes, had read the notes, learned, revised, सब कुछ एक बार ही करा हुआ था, but you forget. And also there is new things that keep on adding every year. So this year 2023 में I started preparing from February or March, because उससे पहले there were rumors कि SEBI का एग्जाम आएगा. So once we knew कि SEBI का एग्जाम नहीं आ रहा है, there's only RBI that's going to come. By the way, I haven't prepared for any other exam. It's only either SEBI or RBI Grade B. So February, March, I started preparing diligently. I finished my static portion first, which is for phase 2. So I did finance static and then I did management static. I couldn't complete it. वो हुआ नहीं पूरे मार्च में, so 50% हो गया था. along with that I was also working, तो उसमें भी थोड़ा time कम मिलता है. After that, I picked up from April. I picked up phase 1 की तैयारी अच्छे से. April, May, June ये 3 महीने अच्छे से phase 1 पढ़ा. Wherein current affairs, PIB 247, RBI 247, which is the finance current affairs part, government schemes, then quant, reasoning, and English. Those I did using mock tests. So that is the approach that I followed. And April, May से definitely phase 1 की तैयारी करी है. उससे पहले I had covered the static portion. तो अब सिर्फ करंट और लेट्स से आंसर राइटिंग, सो अब वो करना रह गया था जो फेज 2 से पहले मैंने करा.
तो जब फाइनेंस मैनेजमेंट पढ़ा, यू हैड ऑलरेडी रेड दैट वंस बिफोर, तो इसके नोट्स पहले बनाए हुए थे या फर्स्ट टाइम बनाए?
सो बाय लास्ट ईयर आई वाज प्रिपेयरिंग ऑन माय ओन. आई डिड नॉट हैव अ कोर्स यहाँ का. सो थैंक्स टू यू, आई वाज वर्किंग हियर यहाँ पे, तो आई हैड द नोट्स, एक्सेस टू नोट्स. सो अब the notes were different, so I had to add on to the earlier notes that I had, and I started reading these new notes. तो वो मेरे लिए वो एक fresh start थी because notes नए थे. So I kept on adding to the earlier notes, to the previous notes, but वो हाँ वो पहले वाले भी चले, and I kept on adding these ones as well.
नोट्स बनाने का ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या था तुम्हारा? बिकॉज आई टॉक अबाउट दिस विद अ लॉट ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स, और मैं सोच रहा था एक स्पेशल सेशन लेने की इसके ऊपर भी. बट व्हाट अकॉर्डिंग टू यू इज द प्राइमरी पर्पस ऑफ मेकिंग नोट्स? इज इट just to have something in writing so that you're able to focus when you're reading something, or is it something else? What was going on in your mind?
So there are always two kind of people. एक जो अपने notes बनाते हैं, and second जो सिर्फ printouts ले लेते हैं and they highlight it और साथ में थोड़ा बहुत लिख लिया if they have to. I am the former one. I like to make notes. जितने बड़े जैसे भी हों, I want to make notes. The reason is when I go to the exam, or just one day or 2, 3 days before the exam when I'm revising, I will remember everything that I had written. जहाँ मैंने highlight करा हुआ है, किस page पे मैंने क्या लिखा है, I would remember everything because I've read my notes enough times. So the first is when you are preparing those notes. The second is when you are adding to those notes. Then you keep adding, re-adding, and then you revise it 4-5 times. Revision हो जाती है. So my purpose was कि last days पे you have to remember what is written in your notes and किस order में लिखा है. That also helps you to write the actual answer in the exam. So for me, that was the purpose of making notes.
Ultimately, if you can't revise using your notes, your own notes, then they're useless.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Perfect. That is the message that I wanted to go across. Wonderful. Coming back, you were talking about phase 1, but current affairs mein you mentioned all the 3 sources: Spotlight, or maybe you used Affairs Cloud as well, RBI 247 and PIB 247, government schemes, etc., etc. What is the mistake that students make here? And you know the mistakes that they make about this, and what do you think should they be doing?
I think the first mistakes that students make is planning करते हैं but they don't implement it. So they keep asking कि कितने महीने का पढ़ना है, ये पढ़ना है, वो पढ़ना है. They have a lot of questions. I tell you what. So phase 2 में I was standing outside the center. I was with my father, and 3-4 students came up to me, मैम dates ये आएंगी, government schemes की dates आती हैं, ये ऐसे पढ़ना है, वैसे पढ़ना है. Even before the exam, they're panicking about क्या क्या आ सकता है. So their focus is not about learning or implementing their plans. It's only planning and planning and planning. So one mistake is over planning but not implementation of plans. So that is the first mistake. Talking about all the sources, current affairs के लिए I followed Affairs Cloud, made notes, revised them, re-revised them, gave mocks. Mocks में जो गलतियां हो गई, then I revised them again. This year, in phase 1, the current affairs part or the GA part, it was not very difficult. It was a little unconventional. We already knew कि government schemes के questions बहुत आने लग गए हैं, PIB से questions बहुत आने लग गए हैं, because phase 2 में the number of MCQ questions have reduced. So now phase 1 में government schemes and PIB के questions बहुत आते हैं. We already knew that, but every time the exam will give you something different. This time the different thing was कि थोड़ा सा lengthy था. Like I personally could not even read the 80 questions. So I was already panicking कि वो पढ़े ही नहीं है मैंने, कितने तो मिस हो गए, पढ़ भी नहीं पाए. So one has to increase their reading speed, which would come only if you give enough mocks. So mocks दो, reading speed increase करो. Be prepared for any anything that the exam might put, any situation that the exam might put you in. Easy भी हो सकता है, difficult भी हो सकता है. There are things which we already plan in our head कि हमें पता है ये तो होगा ही होगा. जैसे let's suppose difficult है या government schemes बहुत आती हैं, so वो होगा ही होगा. But what else can be asked? The finance current affairs से इस बार बहुत सारे questions थे, that was different. So I would say preparation for phase 1 should be, or one mistake that students do is, number one, that's over planning and not implementation. And give enough mocks, try to analyze those mocks, and be prepared for whatever situation you are put in the actual interview. And sorry, the actual exam.
मैं एक क्वेश्चन पूछना चाहता हूँ. स्टूडेंट्स को लग सकता है कि मैं अपनी मार्केटिंग कर रहा हूँ, बट दैट्स नॉट द ऑब्जेक्टिव. बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स ऐसा करते हैं. मैंने भी व्हेन आई वाज प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर सम ऑफ द अदर एग्जाम, मुझे याद है जब मैं 11th में था, आई वाज प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर सम एग्जाम, मैंने भी वो मिस्टेक की थी. मैंने एक जगह कोचिंग स्टार्ट कर दी, बट मेरा ट्रस्ट नहीं है उनके ऊपर, या फिर मेरे पास मेरे दिमाग में चल रहा है और क्या, तो मैंने वो भी नहीं पढ़ा, जो वो टीचर बता रहा है वो भी नहीं कवर किया, एंड आई एम रनिंग आफ्टर समथिंग कम्प्लीटली डिफरेंट. और उनके खाली नोट्स है मेरे पास, सो आई डोंट नो व्हाट दे आर ट्राइंग टू टीच मी थ्रू देयर नोट्स. तो मैं इधर का भी नहीं रहा, उधर का भी नहीं रहा. डिड यू try to run after a lot of sources, or did you stick to certain sources only and make sure कि भाई ये पढ़ के इसमें से आ गया तो ठीक है, नहीं आया तो ठीक है?
I never ran after multiple sources, कभी भी नहीं. जब मैं खुद पढ़ रही थी तब भी नहीं, and this year I had sources, I mean I had notes from this organization, तो तब भी नहीं. Because आप एक इंस्टीट्यूट के ही नोट्स पूरे कंप्लीट कर लो, वही बहुत बड़ी बात है. And not just once, you have to do it at least thrice. Read it once, then learn it, then revise it. तो ये 3 टाइप तो करना ही पड़ता है. That's very difficult. And if you go after multiple sources, तो कभी-कभी चीजें बहुत parallelly आप अगर एक, let's suppose आप एक ही चैप्टर 2-3 जगह से पढ़ रहे हैं, डेफिनेटली आप सेम चीज रिवाइज कर रहे हैं, बट थिंग्स कैन बी डिफरेंट, योर अप्रोच विल चेंज, एंड इट इट क्रिएट्स बहुत फिनिकी हो जाते हैं हम पढ़ते पढ़ते. सो कुछ एक डेफिनेट एक पैटर्न बना के चलो कि लेट्स सपोज फॉर वन चैप्टर आई हैव टू फॉलो दीज नोट्स, और फॉर लेट्स से फाइनेंस अगर हमने इस कोचिंग के फॉलो करने हैं, बहुत अच्छे नोट्स हैं, सो कीप फॉलोइंग दैट वुड बी माय सजेशन. एंड आई थिंक एवरीबडी हु क्लियर्स द एग्जाम वुड से द सेम थिंग कि एक ही इंस्टीट्यूट के अगर आप 4 बार कर लोगे, दैट विल बी मोर देन इनफ. एंड ऑल्सो देयर आर करंट अफेयर पार्ट्स एज वेल, तो उनसे भी बहुत क्वेश्चंस आते हैं, एंड यू ऑल्सो सप्लीमेंट योर आंसर्स विद द करंट अफेयर्स पोर्शन. So it also depends on you. How are you able to present your answer? It's not just about the notes that you read. You have to add on new things to your notes. So वो current affairs से आता है that part. But multiple sources I would never suggest to anybody कि 3-4 sources follow कर लो.
बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स अभी ऐसा सोचते हैं, एंड इट्स अ वेरी वैलिड कंसर्न दैट दे हैव कि सर एक बार पढ़ लिया लेकिन याद कुछ नहीं है, 2 बार पढ़ लिया लेकिन अभी भी 50% ही याद है. Did it happen with you as well, and how did you tackle that?
ये तो होता है. I think that's the case with everybody कि हमें सब कुछ याद नहीं रह सकता. The first thing is to clear your basics. जो भी आप चीज पढ़ रहे हो, let's suppose if you read chapter number 1, which is regulatory bodies, in which you are reading the basics of RBI. This is in finance. So what is the chapter talking about? Why is it talking about? Are there additional facts that the chapter has? So step by step चलोगे, दिमाग में भी ऐसी ही चीजें डालोगे that the first thing that I have to know is what the chapter is talking about. Let's suppose if you're doing motivation, what the chapter is talking about, उसमें है क्या, theories of motivation, किसने दी है, what is the purpose, what is the facts that they have given, what different things that they have talked about. Now these are 5 things that I've talked about right now, but start आपको first से ही करना है कि what is the chapter. So धीरे धीरे करके चलोगे तो I think the retention will be more. And again, revision is the key. जितनी बार revise कर सकते हो उतना ही कम है. And then mocks also. So these 3-4 steps if you follow, definitely retention रहेगी exam का.
अपने notes में you followed an IBC framework,
Yes.
that is what you like to call it. So what is that framework, and how can I feel it's a beautiful way of creating your own notes. We can't do it because we have to teach in a certain way, but the student can very well do that. Can you explain that to the students जिससे कि आने वाले students उसको use कर पाएं?
Yes. So in every chapter, जो भी उसमें portion है, let's suppose chapter number 1 RBI का, हमारे यहाँ पे finance का, it talks about RBI, the functions of RBI, what are the subsidiaries of RBI, right? So I would make questions out of these. So what if a question comes on, what are the subsidiaries of RBI? Now we all know कि हमें answer लिखना है introduction, body and conclusion में. So that is what I used to do. I used to write IBC everywhere. If a question comes on subsidiaries of RBI, in introduction I would write about RBI. Then I would always write answer in points. That is something that we all say. So points में subsidiaries के बारे में लिखा and then conclude. So this is a habit that you get. उससे answer writing बहुत easy हो जाती है. So while you're preparing, while you're making notes, while you're learning a chapter, start thinking from the point of view of intro में क्या आ सकता है, body में क्या आ सकता है, conclusion में क्या आ सकता है. This is something that I did during the answer writing as well. Can I talk about it?
Yeah.
हाँ. So while answer writing in the phase 2 exam, so what I did was हमें answer rough sheets मिलती हैं पहले ही. So I just wrote down question number 1, 2, 3, gave enough gap, and I wrote IBC. I is for introduction, body, and conclusion. I also wrote down few pointers that I wanted to touch on. Let's suppose if you want to give any fact, तो वहाँ side में लिख दिया give fact. And this everything I did before I saw the questions or before the exam actually started. So I had written IBC. Question number 1, IBC. Question number 2, IBC. This is the format that I had created already. Now, let's suppose a question comes. So there was a question on World Bank ki migration report. So in ESI. So what can I write in introduction? I can write about migration. So when I read the question, I just wrote intro mein kya aayega? Write about migration. If you remember any facts, write them down. Then body mein kya aayega? Pointers mein likhna hai. And then in body, when you're writing an answer in points, also try to touch whichever topics that you can. So for example, write about economy, write about social issues if you want to touch on that angle, write about the marginalized sections of the economy, how is migration impacting them, how is migration impacting women, globalization से क्या impact है. So touch each and every point that you can. Environment के बारे में बात करो. So this is all I had written: economics, environment, my women angle, social issues. This is all I had written. This is before the exam that I, before looking at the questions, I had already done this. So this is the IBC framework that I follow.
Wonderful. I think तुम्हारे नोट्स उस तरह से होंगे स्टूडेंट्स के, और एग्जाम में भी उस तरह से पहले से प्लान करके जाओगे तो इट्स गोइंग टू मेक अ बिग डिफरेंस. Let's now come to phase 2, the exam time. Both phase 1 and phase 2. What were the things that you kept specifically made sure that you would do before the exam or at the time of examination? Phase 1 पहले डिस्कस करते हैं. Phase 2 में you already talked about certain things, but if you can recall something else as well. So let's start with phase 1 की एग्जाम टाइम में क्या क्या चीज़ें गलत शायद पहले की हो या स्टूडेंट्स कर रहे हो, and what went right, what went in your favor this time.
So while preparing, preparation, you have to give enough mocks. So ये सबसे बड़ी चीज है कि they prepare you for the actual exam. कौन से questions pick करने हैं, that is the most important thing. Quantitative aptitude काफी difficult होने लग गया है. Similarly, logical reasoning is the reasoning portion as well. So if you give enough mocks, you already know कि हमें कौन से questions pick करने हैं, कौन से नहीं करने. So let's suppose if I talk about quantitative aptitude, I had only prepared certain kind of questions. मैंने सारे topics पढ़े भी नहीं थे. Like I hadn't studied the SICI, जो simple interest, compound interest. I did not study profit and loss वाला अच्छे से. Ratio proportion थोड़ा बहुत करा था. But what I focused more on was DI. I focused on inequality वाले questions, quadratic equations वाले questions. I also focused on missing number or number series. So these are the questions जो 5 questions आते ही आते हैं. And when you know कि यहाँ से 5 questions आएंगे, आप उस पर परफेक्ट हो जाओ उस चीज में कि कैसे भी क्वेश्चंस आ जाए, आई बी एबल टू सॉल्व इट. 2 DIs आती हैं, one is difficult, one is easy. Unfortunately, I was in shift 1 and दोनों ही difficult थी इस बारी. So I did not pick up any DI because both of them were difficult. I did missing number की series, missing number वाले questions. 5 questions वहां से करे थे. I think I did only 6 and 7 questions and marks भी फिर इतने ही आए थे normalization के बाद 5 के around, just right above the cutoff. So that's how you have to plan, जो कि mock से आएगा when you give enough mocks. Similarly, in logical reasoning, you do not have to pick up puzzles first. Try to solve the basic questions, जैसे blood relations के हैं, data sufficiency वाले questions हैं, sitting arrangement. These were easy. Syllogism, very easy. So easy topics पहले पकड़ लो. There are going to be easy questions. There are going to be average questions. There are going to be difficult and very difficult questions as well. Puzzles is one of those things that is very difficult. So do not try to pick up a puzzle. ये तो हम सबको अभी तक पता ही है. In fact, while I was giving the exam, last के 5 minute बचे थे. Now I had 2 options, either to pick up one puzzle or do critical thinking वाले questions, assertion reasoning and assumptions वाले. Now I thought कि assumptions वाले 5 questions कर लेते हैं. What if I am unable to solve the puzzle? So that's what I did. Last के 5 minutes में I did 4 questions of assumptions and inference and all that. So that actually helped me. और again ये mocks से ही आता है, ये उससे पहले नहीं आएगा. Similarly, GA, this time GA was very lengthy. So be prepared next time पे अगर lengthy questions आएंगे, how are you going to tackle them? ज़्यादा टाइम नहीं लगाना है, वो दिमाग में ही रखना है. 30 seconds में नहीं हो रहा है, just move on to the next question. There will not be enough time to come back to those questions because you won't be able to read the 80 questions in the first time as well. So be prepared for any situation. English maybe also pick up your favorite topics or topics that you are able to do. So I kept RC for the last. उससे पहले मैंने सारी चीजें कर ली. So RC में I think I just skipped one question and majorly 29 questions I did it. So this was the strategy for phase 1.
You were talking about the importance or the purpose of newspaper, not the importance. What do you think is the purpose of newspaper for GA or for any other subject in phase 1?
Yes. So ये question बहुत आता है बच्चों का कि newspaper हमें पढ़ना है या नहीं पढ़ना. So newspaper helps us in a lot of ways. Yes, current affairs चीजें पता लगती हैं, that's one thing. But it develops a reading habit in us, which is very important for phase 1 exam. Also for phase 2 as well. But phase 1 में you have to read the RC, you have to read it very fast. Similarly, critical thinking वाले reasoning के questions, reading speed increase होती है. Definitely editorials वगैरह पढ़ के we'll be able to understand what is going on, we'll be able to have an opinion on various current affairs के topics, but it helps us in phase 1 reading newspaper. I would suggest if aspirants they can read newspapers every day, they should
take out about 30-40 minutes. Yes. Probably for the newspaper. Let's come to phase 2. Like, what do you think went in your favor? What do you think went against you this time as well? And there were some unconventional questions, some difficult questions. How did you tackle those? जैसे open-ended questions, write any 3 government schemes. अब इसमें मैं भी कंफ्यूज हो जाऊंगा कौन सी लिखूं और कौन सी ना लिखूं. मुझे आती तो बहुत सारी हैं, कौन सी लिखूं जो ज़्यादा नंबर मिले. So how did you make those decisions at the time of the exam? That's very important. You have to take a lot of decisions. So what did you do in phase 2?
So in phase 2 I would say सबसे पहले तो phase 2 के लिए be prepared to sit for long number of hours, be prepared for typing, be prepared for cancelling out any noise that you will hear because you will hear. बहुत distractions हो जाती हैं phase 2 में. तो सबसे बड़ी problem phase 2 में है इतनी देर 5 घंटे के लिए बैठना. Plus when you get the break you come out of the center 12 बजे, very hot, literally sun सर पे होता है, बहुत ज़्यादा गर्मी होती है, everybody is sweating at that time. So just mentally be prepared कि ये होने वाला है phase 2 में. Coming to how how to tackle the questions or how to write better answer, I've already told about the IBC framework that I used to follow. उसके अलावा there were a few unconventional questions. For example, ESI में there were 3 questions 15 markers के and तीनों ही तीनों reports में थे. One report I had already discussed in RBI 247 वाला session. That was RBI की report on currency and finance. Then there were 2 more reports. I think one was IMF की and the other one was World Bank. अब किसी ने नहीं पढ़ी है because सब कोई reports नहीं पढ़ते हैं, तो कैसे solve करें ऐसे questions को. Luckily for me मैं पढ़ के गई थी. I had read the summary of that report last 2 दिन पहले ही. But if anyone, I mean, किसी ने अगर नहीं पढ़ी है, what they can do is they tell you the question. So we have to read the question very carefully. The question tells you what they want you to answer. So the question was about migration. The question was about World Bank ने migration पे क्या बोला है, their report, and also what model the World Bank has given. Now let's suppose we do not know what the model World Bank has talked about because we haven't read the report, but we know what is migration. We know how migration is impacting each and every country, or let's say continent wise अगर पकड़ लो. So pick out any theme. The theme that I picked out was different continents, how migration is impacting various continents. So let's suppose sub-Saharan African nations पे क्या impact है, climate change से क्या impact पड़ रहा है, why is there migration from India or to India or Asian economies, Russia वगैरह. Then US में migration का different ही aspect है, Mexico and Canada से सबसे ज़्यादा migration है. So these were the kind of so this is how you link the topic that is given to you, and linking is very important. Even if you don't know what is asked in the question, try to link it, try to write whatever you know and to the best of your ability, I would say. And yes, intro, body conclusion बहुत अच्छे से करो, बहुत बढ़िया करो. If you can write way forward or solution, that is also one thing. Now coming to government schemes वाला question, I actually skipped that question. Again, यही reason था because government schemes बहुत सारी हैं और बहुत कुछ आता है. But the thing is, if you pick out any 3 government schemes, अगर एक भी चीज आपने गलत कर दी तो हो जाएगा. मतलब let's suppose you write out wrong year or wrong ministry. So and at the same time कौन सी schemes ज़्यादा marks देंगी, that also was the thought. So I did the other question which was a little easier, and at the same time I think you have to broaden the horizon. If you write enough things कि environment के बारे में बात कर दो हर question में, if you can talk about SDG sustainable development goals, if you can quote somebody, so this is what I had already planned कि मैं questions में वो करूँगी ही करूँगी. So that's what I did.
Let's assume कि तुमको लिखना पड़ता कि any three government schemes. What model would you have created then and there?
Right. So I probably wouldn't have picked एक ही ministry की तीनों schemes. I would have gone for 3 different ministries, right? One scheme would have been unconventional, जो examiner को लगे कि यार ये तो किसी को भी नहीं आती, इनको कैसे आती है, right? So I had prepared a senior citizen वाली government scheme, Atal something, I forgot the name right now. So that talks about silver economy. So that is one scheme I would have picked up. Agriculture की तो करनी ही करनी है. And one flagship scheme, let's suppose we can talk about Swachh Bharat Mission or Ayushman Bharat. So these flagship schemes जो सबसे ज़्यादा number fetch करेंगी. And also इनमें we know facts. We also know current affairs. Talk about that. PIB में हम पढ़ते हैं कि आयुष्मान भारत में कितने clinics बने हैं, या what is the target, is it achieved, what has been the allocation. So do talk about whatever you've read in PIB. And government schemes के अभी ज़्यादा questions आए नहीं हैं, which are already asked in NABARD. NABARD में they ask about government schemes in descriptive. RBI में only this year, the very first time they've asked, and वो भी write about any 3 schemes आया था. So maybe next year ministry wise questions आ जाएं. So one suggestion would be to add on whatever points that you can from the PIB.
Let's come to the interview, because your interview was, I believe, was interesting, and we had taken that risk of mentioning that you had been teaching here and you had been teaching online on YouTube. So we were expecting कि finance में तो they are going to grill you, they are going to go in depth, and that happened. What do you think was different this time in your interview from last time, and what would you suggest to the students जो probably इस बार interview में गए थे नहीं हुआ finally, या फिर who are going to write this year and first attempt is the best attempt, तो किस तरह से interview को approach करना चाहिए?
So since I had given interview last time और मेरे अच्छे नंबर ज़्यादा नहीं थे, I think it's only the interview phase जिसमें I did not perform very well. I decided अब same mistake तो 2 बार नहीं करनी है. I was very nervous. Also I did not have a lot of time. And coincidentally उन्होंने मुझसे पूछा, you were there last time? I said yes, I was. They said क्या problem रही है? So I told them कि these were the 2 problems. One, I was underconfident, I got nervous because this was my first interview in RBI, and second was underprepared. Pura preparation, because I had, I think, just 20 days to prepare for the interview stage. So preparation ज़्यादा नहीं हुई थी. So I decided I'm not going to repeat the same mistakes again. Nervous नहीं होना है, no matter जितने मुश्किल questions आए, nervous नहीं होना है, हंस देना है, बोल देना है नहीं आता, nervous नहीं होना है. That's exactly what I did, what I followed. Now interview वाले दिन a student came to me and he asked me कि मैम आपको, and we both were waiting for our turn. So he asked me कि मैम आपको क्या लगता है कि क्या पूछते हैं इंटरव्यू में? So I said, I mean, what do they judge on? क्या points हैं जिसमें आपको judge करेंगे? So I said, knowledge ठीक है, होती है. They want to check कि basic भी आता है या नहीं आता. So yes, knowledge definitely. Then there's your personality, how you carry yourself, and at the same time how you're able to tackle difficult questions. Even if you say I don't know, how are you saying it? So your personality, your overall personality. And third is कितना wide आप सोच रहे हो. So I think these are the personally मेरा opinion है, maybe I am wrong, I don't know, but 2 बारी दिया है and so many mocks I've given, and थोड़े mocks मैंने खुद भी लिए हैं, तो इसलिए मुझे थोड़ा सा पता है कि what we as teachers, mock interviews में हम क्या देखते हैं बच्चों में. These are 3 things: knowledge definitely, personality, and how broad you can think of, like what are the points that you can think of and you can say in that 1 minute that they give you. You can only have like 10-20 seconds to frame an answer in your head and then give it. Also structuring of answer is very important, to have a very good structure of answer. So uske liye mock interviews dene is very important. At the same time, you have to have a list of all the possible questions that they can ask you, both profile based and current affairs based or finance based, or what the RBI is doing. And also I would suggest to go through the transcripts. You get to know कि कैसे questions पूछ रहे हैं, profile based ज़्यादा पूछ रहे हैं, or they are asking about RBI. So this year they were definitely asking about RBI as an organization.
Any 2-3 questions that they asked from you that you can recall, and probably the students can know a little bit about those kind of questions?
So to be honest, I thought मेरा इंटरव्यू बहुत इजी होगा. I was prepared for a difficult interview, but दिमाग में था कि बाकी सबका बहुत इजी हो रहा है तो मेरा भी इजी होगा. A friend of mine had given his interview just 2-3 days before mine. तो उनका बहुत इजी हुआ था. I thought सबका इजी हो रहा है, but unfortunately what I think मेरा थोड़ा सा difficult हुआ. So the first question was asked by the chairman sir was break even analysis. हम commerce में पढ़ते हैं break even analysis. I answered that. Then another member asked me about capital adequacy ratio, and I mentioned Basel norms in that. So he started asking about Basel norms. He asked me about Basel 1, Basel 2, Basel 3. What is the difference? What are the pillars? And I kept answering. I just kept answering. Jo unhone pucha, I kept answering. So they asked me about ICAAP. I was able to answer what is ICAAP, what is the purpose, why does RBI follow this, why is it included in Pillar 2 or Pillar 3. So that also I answered, but they wanted something else. So I wouldn't say they were grilling me, but they wanted to, they wanted me to think in a different angle probably. So they kept asking me कि और कुछ बता दो, इस angle में सोचो. They were pushing me to think in a particular angle or in a particular direction, which probably in that moment I wasn't able to. So after a point I said कि sir इससे ज़्यादा मुझे नहीं आता है. That is all I know. So I think उसके बाद probably that's what I thought कि they are disappointed. Maybe they were not. I don't know. So about Basel norms, then the questions were about RBI's balance sheet. A lot of questions were about RBI's balance sheet. Size increase कैसे होगा, size decrease कैसे होगा, foreign currency, how does that impact RBI, the exchange rate, how does that impact the RBI's balance sheet in particular. So these kind of questions were there, and again, I was able to answer those. Then Utkarsh goals पे question था annual, because I had taught annual report and that's what I had written. So Utkarsh के goals पे question था, which I thought was a little difficult क्योंकि, and that too ma'am asked me about Department of Supervision में उत्कर्ष के क्या goals हैं. So थोड़े बहुत मुझे आते थे. I told her. उससे ज़्यादा I just said कि ma'am I don't know.
Okay, now we are coming towards the end of our interview, and I want to ask 2 specific questions. Number one, as a teacher, not only as a person who has cleared the exam, what do you feel working or teaching? How did it help you clear the examination? And connected with this, what kind of advice would you want to give to the students based upon your experience?
I would actually like to say one thing. स्टूडेंट्स को आई मेट स्टूडेंट्स इन फेज 1 एंड फेज 2. उनको लगता है कि टीचर है तो उनको सब कुछ ही आता होगा, आपके लिए तो बहुत इजी है. इंटरव्यू में भी देयर वाज अ स्टूडेंट हु सेड कि मैम आपको तो सब कुछ आता है, आपका तो बहुत ही बढ़िया जाएगा. बट ऐसा होता नहीं है, बिकॉज वी टीचिंग वन सब्जेक्ट, वी नो एवरीथिंग अबाउट दैट सब्जेक्ट. सो दिस इज व्हाट आई यूज्ड टू से कि आई एम टीचिंग फाइनेंस करंट अफेयर्स, यू कैन आस्क मी एनीथिंग अबाउट फाइनेंस करंट अफेयर्स, मे बी आई एम एबल टू आंसर. बट व्हाट अबाउट ईएसआई, व्हाट अबाउट मैनेजमेंट, व्हाट अबाउट पीआईबी, व्हिच इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट. गवर्नमेंट स्कीम्स इजी नहीं है, मेरे लिए तो बहुत डिफिकल्ट थी गवर्नमेंट स्कीम्स को ग्रास्प करना. So there are so many things that you have to learn, and that comes because you're an aspirant. But again, you're a teacher, then that's when you're teaching and वो सब चीजें. So it's, for me it was, I think, subject wise. Finance, current affairs, this was easy. Government schemes and PIB, ESI, management, इनमें मैंने उतनी ही मेहनत करी है जितनी किसी aspirant ने करी होगी. That's so. How has teaching helped me? Finance portion में बहुत ज़्यादा help हुई है. Then reading newspapers, reading the annual report, reading the RBI website. Interview के लिए मेरी बहुत ज़्यादा help हो गई, because now every aspirant has to read the RBI website every day. कुछ ना कुछ नया आ रहा है. They have to read newspapers every day. MPC की reports पूरी पढ़नी है. So this is something that I had been doing for the last 1 year. तो मेरे लिए वो चीज़ थोड़ी सी easy हो गई. But other subjects, बाकी I had to study it like every other aspirant.
You'd also talked about RBI YouTube channel. What role did it play in your interview?
Yeah. So not a lot of students know कि RBI का खुद का भी एक YouTube चैनल है. In fact, I got to know it very late because मैं थोड़ा पढ़ा रही हूँ, so I do a lot of research. So that's how I got to know about the RBI का खुद का YouTube channel. That's not just for consumer awareness or awareness about the the banking products or services that the RBI has or various banks offer. It's actually they have interviews, they have speeches. So after the monetary policy committee की जो monetary policy statement आती है, they do a press session wherein the press asks question. Now how it helps is in the interview stage, and that helped me a lot. interview stage mein, I kept on watching this entire interview of RBI governors and RBI deputy governors. Um, the press was asking them questions and they were able to answer those questions. Now this helps you in the interview phase because you get to know कि हमें कैसे answer करने हैं or what is expected or how is the governor answering questions. So वो बहुत अच्छा लगता है वो देख के. So I would suggest everybody to go through the RBI का YouTube channel. It's very interesting.
Okay, let's come to the last part. What advice would you have as a teacher as well as an officer now? So you're playing dual role at the moment. तो students को जो भी 2024 में देना चाहते हैं एग्जाम, what advice would you have for them?
Um, one advice, not one, two, three advices that I would like to give is सबसे पहले तो do not focus on planning much, focus on implementation. We are motivated enough और motivation में हमें लगता है कि 8 घंटे पढ़ेंगे, 12 घंटे पढ़ेंगे, पूरा plan timetable बना लेते हैं. But we do not think of how are we going to implement that timetable. Discipline is very important. Yes, motivation is important, but discipline is very important. So think about discipline more than you think about motivation or planning. How will you be disciplined enough? How will you implement the plans that you have made for yourself? अगर वो हो जाएगा तो definitely exam clear करना बहुत easy हो जाएगा. The second thing that I would like to talk about is sacrifices. हम सबको करने पड़ते हैं. So whatever sacrifice that you have to make temporarily, you should do that. You know, these could be about distractions if you're distracted. और जैसे मुझे मूवीज देखना, नेटफ्लिक्स वगैरह देखना बहुत ज्यादा पसंद था. आई कंप्लीटली शट ऑफ और अभी भी मन नहीं करता दोबारा देखने का. सो आई also isolated myself from my family, from my friends. That's what you have to do. That's what you have to do if you want to clear the exam or any exam for that matter.
Wonderful. So with this, let's close the session. Congratulations once again. छोटा सा गिफ्ट है जो कि तुम्हारे लिए लाया गया है. This is
Thank you.
And so this brings us to the end of our first discussion, the most awaited one, I would say, with Karnima ma'am. अगर आगे हम कुछ सोच पाए तो शायद फिर से कुछ ना कुछ डिस्कशन करने की कोशिश करेंगे. But I would also want to talk with various other RBI officers, जिससे कि उनकी स्टोरी, उनकी कहानी किस तरह से उन्होंने क्लियर किया, क्या क्या हर्डल्स फेस किए, क्या प्लानिंग थी. जैसे कि Karnima ma'am का IBC framework can be something that you can follow very easily. So we can talk about such other things through other RBI officers, and probably you can implement them in your studies and clear your examination in the next attempt itself. With this, let's close the session. Thanks a lot for watching the entire session. I'll see you once again with more such wonderful RBI interviews. Till then, take care. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.